we all know that AI performs artificial intelligence, what it means when you get computers to perform what may otherwise be considered what may be considered intelligent behavior. So when you do that, that is what AI is, and it's different from it's different from normal algorithms. Normally, you develop an algorithm because you know how to solve a problem. So if somebody knows how to make idli or aloo paratha, you can create a recipe step 1, 2, 3, 4 like that because it is known. But what if the you want to figure out the behavior of nature? Uh, there is nobody who wrote a manual. There is nobody who sat down and said this is the algorithm how something how electron moves. You have to discover it, and that discovery is laws of physics. We call physics is basically understanding the algorithms which are not known. Nobody has presented to us. The person who created it is not sitting down and explaining to us like how to make idlis. Second is, it could be human made, it could be man made, but the people who made it are no longer there. So Harappa, what is the language? What does that language mean? Why they did this? Why they did that? We don't know because those people are not available. So you could have a situation where human beings made something, but they are not available. Third is unconscious. There's a lot of intelligent behavior inside me, but I'm not conscious how my food is digesting. I'm not watching inside the way I can watch outside. My indriyas are outside. I have no internal indriyas to tell me how this food is being digested, what is happening in my blood, how the biochemistry is working. I don't know. So there are a lot of domains where there is intelligent behavior, but there is nobody who sit down and tell us this is the algorithm. Machine learning can actually help you in all of these things. So I'll say things just to by way of tutorial to come on a common vocabulary, so that even those who don't know will begin to understand it. So big data is the availability, is the large amount of information, large amount of case studies, large amount of experiences, transactions, which a system has with the environment. And then using the behavior of this system by sending it information, transactions, experiences, seeing how it behaves, you can figure out its intelligence, and that's how you train your machine. So you can train your machine based on what is called big data, which is a very large amount of data. Each item of data gives you some aspect of experience that this intelligence concerns this intelligence. And there are 5 V's: volume, how big is the data volume? That's important. Veracity means truth. Is the data truthful? Is it reliable? Is it fake? Second is velocity, how fast it's coming, because this data is being created at a tremendous speed. Variety means how much variety of data there is. So when you're doing drug testing, you don't want to test it on only one kind of person. You want a variety of people. When you are testing natural language processing, when you're training machine language for natural language processing, you want to give it many kinds of diversity, many languages, many kinds of statements within the languages. And value is, what is it worth? How much is it worth? Is it rare? Is it common? And so on. So these are the 5 V's of big data. Now, I'll go through a little bit, one slide each, on a whole lot of different applications. These applications are very important. You can make a whole career in any one of them, and taken collectively, it's changing the whole world. So in healthcare, there is use for diagnostic, monitoring, public health. A whole lot of AI models are being used, in fact, to track and forecast the COVID pandemic and anticipate. There are models of epidemiology. There are robotic nurses. In US, they have some of the leading hospitals in New York have robotic nurses, and they've done a survey with patients to see if they like the robotic nurse compared to the human nurse. In some situations, actually, patients prefer the robotic nurse. The robotic nurse has no mood. Robotic nurse is not going to feel sad, angry. It's a robot. And you don't feel embarrassed. If you're doing something very private, you don't feel embarrassed because after all, it's a machine. It's not a human being who's going to pry into your privacy. So there are some reasons why patients actually have, in surveys, they've actually preferred robotic nurses. So the trend is definitely there. Then there is the human genome research, a huge amount of research on the genome project. We are talking about tens of thousands of combinations. tens of thousands of parts, and millions of combinations. So it's obviously impossible to do it in any other way. Drug discovery. The reason this COVID, drugs have been found, vaccinations have been found at record speed. There are many factors, but one of the factors is also AI. Use of machine learning and use of AI for drug discoveries is huge. And then medical implants. You might have heard about this, that there are Elon Musk's company is doing this, US CIA and Department of Defense is also doing it, putting in chips that can record the neural activity when you are feeling happy, when you are feeling sad, different moods corresponding to the different moods. There's a huge burst of neurons, recording those, and then being able to replicate that feeling by playing back that memory. So if they have figured out how your neurons are behaving when you are happy, then every time they play back that pattern from their memory, they play back their pattern, it replicates that behavior in you. You feel happy. So this is being used on a trial basis to solve problems like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what soldiers face in a war. So soldiers are traumatized in a war. They come back, they have nightmares, they have mental health disorders, and they're trying all kinds of ways to solve the problem. One of them is to replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts. Give them memories which they want to have. Similarly, people with bipolar disorder, various other mental disorders, people with violence, criminals with a lot of violence tendencies, the experiments are how to change their mental behavior using these interventions. Now, of course, there is a concern. Once the chip is gone in your head, then what else it can do? Maybe the chip comes to into your head because it will solve some problem. You're going through a depression, you're becoming an addict, and so this can change your behavior. But once the chips are popular in the brain, then they could also be used for entertainment. They give you fantasy, you'll feel something nice, and then maybe it becomes a lifestyle. हमारे पास तो ये चिप है, बहुत बढ़िया चिप है, आपके पास कौन सा चिप है, हमारे पास तो ये वाला चिप है. Like that, it could become a status symbol. It could become something that is then used to control people. So if you think that this is not realistic, let me tell you, Siri and these kind of devices that are ambient AI all over, these devices that use natural language processing, understand what you are saying, build a whole profile of your life, your whole naksha of your map of your particular individual life, who the people are, what you like, what you don't like, the layout of your house, whether you drink tea or coffee, all that is being figured out. Now, when they ask questions to different age brackets, what do you think of this? People my age, 10% said we are okay with it. Otherwise, we don't like the privacy being invaded. Younger group, maybe 15% find it okay, like that. But when you go to people who are below 20, suddenly the percentage of people who feel that this is fine, this is the future, we love it, we are not concerned about privacy at all, shoots up to 50 to 75%. This is in the United States. And something similar will happen in India, because what has happened is these young people have been raised on technology invading their privacy. They don't have any problem. Everything is on Facebook, all their pictures, friends. There is facial recognition. So, the algorithms can figure out who you are with, what kind of people. Are you a racist? You only hang out with people of some kind. Are you very liberal? Are you conservative? Are you sexist? They can find out all kind of things about you using machine learning to figure you out. Okay, so the very young people are not concerned about it. This is an issue that is very good news for the tech industry, because it means that the barrier, the defense, the self-defense, the guard is down for young people. And as in the next decade or so, these people grow and they become buyers and they become they have buying power, they become the big consumers. You will find that there'll be a huge demand for these kind of services where there's no regard for privacy. So the health industry may be a way into entertainment through these gadgets. And once you have health and entertainment, these are very big industries, then you may get into many kinds of things about a person's life. So another application is driverless cars. So driverless cars, we already know what it is. Uh, but the problem is that while they say AI creates new jobs, while it kills jobs, it also creates new jobs. The point I'll make later on is maybe driverless cars will create jobs for Tesla and for big car manufacturers, and there'll be jobs in Bangalore and Silicon Valley and China. But what about the tens of millions of people who are in poor villages all over the world that will lose their job? So the loss of job will be lakhs of people in Bihar, Orissa, Africa, various places. And the gain in jobs, even though it may be the same gain, I don't think it will be. I think millions of people will lose jobs, but not millions of people will get new jobs. But even the people who get the new jobs will be concentrated in certain places. So maybe Bangalore will create new jobs for driverless car industry, but Bihar will lose jobs from drivers who will not be needed. So this is an issue. This is an issue called the asymmetric impact of AI on society. Asymmetric means unequal. कईयों को फायदा होगा, कईयों को नुकसान होगा. The rich will get richer, the poor, which is already doing well, will become even bigger success, and some region which will become poorer. Some countries will become bigger, become colonizers. I'm going to introduce a term, digital colonization. Digital colonization. And USA and China are going to become digital colonizers of the world. And others have to either be mixed up, try to survive, but a large part of countries will become colonized again. So, like at one time, there was a fight between Britain and France and these kind of countries to colonize. Now you'll see USA, China competing to be colonizers, which is why they're fighting. That is what their fights are about. In agriculture, AI is without humans. There are these unmanned drones that are going around with image recognition. They're able to recognize images, the boundary of a farm. They're able to recognize, what's the density of fruits, what's the color of the leaves. They're able to diagnose all that. Okay, so this is smart agriculture. This is agriculture through data collection from a large variety of sources. Crop prediction, predicting of future harvest. Will this be a bumper crop, not a bumper crop? Keeping all the factors and using machine learning to learn if the rainfall is like this, what's the impact? If the soil is like that, what's the impact? So the decision making of farmers becoming more automated. These are great benefits too. But these are benefits in the sense that there'll be less uncertainty because machines will be able to figure things out faster and more reliably than human beings can. So then military. I just did a recording with the Air Vice Marshal and one Lieutenant General in India, and I was the only civilian. And this will be played tomorrow. Tomorrow it will be shown. There's a literary festival called Valley of Words, VOW, Valley of Words from Dehradun. Actually, I gave this talk in 2019 on artificial intelligence and India while I was just finishing my book. This book was ready before the COVID, and then due to COVID, we had to delay it. It would come out long time back. So I gave a talk on this book in 2019, I have a recording of that, which we never released. The reaction was so strong. People felt, wow, this is serious. Why hasn't anybody discovered it? Why aren't people talking about it? Some people felt that this is very big controversy. This we have to deal with it. So I decided that rather than releasing the video now, I'll wait until book is coming out. When my book is coming out, I'll talk about it. So वो मेरे पास तैयार है. Now that group invited me again this year's conference, and they said, why don't you talk about your book now because it's coming out? So I talked, and I had three military people. With two other military people, I'm the civilian, and you can watch it. I think they are airing it tomorrow sometime. I don't know the exact time. So what is happening in AI is so important for the military. Everything from there are unmanned submarines, not only driverless cars but driverless submarines, driverless air force. US is building an air force of 1 lakh airplanes without human pilots. So this is like a drone military, uh, militarized robot. So now China helping Pakistan is making a very dangerous combination. Pakistan supplying the boots on the ground, where humans are needed, and China supplying all this AI technology. So previously, when a terrorist smuggled across the border in Kashmir, he had to carry weapons and food, and so it would be very clear to the Indians that this man carrying so much uh, like stuff, who is he, where is he come from? Now the terrorist has to come without without any weapons, food, nothing. He just comes like an ordinary innocent man, just walk across, and at a particular location, particular time, a drone in the middle of the night gives him supplies, gives him his weapons, gives him his food supplies. So drone can go under the radar because it can be tiny, it can be big, it can go all kind of things. And if the drone is shot down, it's shot down. So this Chinese AI technology combined with Pakistani infiltrators, militants, soldiers is a very dangerous combination. India knows, but nobody wants to talk about it publicly because it'll send out a lot of fright and scare and fear. But India is the reason suddenly India start talking about AI is because India realized after this Doklam and this China thing started looking, and US educated the Indians that look, China is way ahead in AI. China is way ahead in AI. And the reason there is this trade war between USA and China has a lot to do with AI, because US feels that China has been stealing their AI secrets and has been using that AI technology to frog ahead. And both the Trump government and now the Biden people are very much interested in funding a huge amount of AI in the United States military to stay ahead of China and make sure they don't catch up. Because whoever wins the war in AI will actually win military wars. It is really that simple. If my army does not have this AI at the same level as your military will be like somebody with tanks, and my military will be like bow and arrow. I'll be fighting with bow and arrow, and you'll be fighting with tanks. It is like that. So if you in fact ask the military people what they like about the Rafale jet, which they're buying at a very huge cost, it is actually AI. A large part of its features are AI based. So this is the future of warfare. And then in financial services, managing risk, making decisions on credit, fraud detection. The crooks are becoming smarter, and the people who are fighting the crooks are also becoming smarter, and both using AI. Then there are algorithms for trading in the stock market, complex pricing models. So in the world of finance, not just trading on stock market, but also internal corporate finance, AI is taking over. In fact, in the Western countries, just USA and Europe alone, tens of thousands of people on Wall Street and these other kind of stock exchanges have lost their jobs already because of automated systems. So the impact is a lot of the outsourced jobs to India are areas which can be easily replaced with machines. So India is quite vulnerable. Tech industry is quite vulnerable because India has not gone ahead into the AI and sitting and doing very old technology, old computer maintenance and things which in the Western world are considered obsolete. So they've outsourced to India because it's cheaper and they need to support those customers. But the point is, India, while we're very proud कि हमारे ये हो गया, tech industry हो गया, export हो गया, in terms of quality, India has not created the patents in AI. India has not created the intellectual property in AI. That is why we have to buy Rafale jets, because we don't have that AI. Other things we can have. So in one sense, we are the biggest exporter of IT and tech and software, but we are not owning the intellectual property. Those people are working for foreign companies, giving them intellectual property, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Google, whether it's Boeing, whether it's IBM, they own the intellectual property. We are selling raw labor, and we are importing the technology back from them at a huge price. So we are among the largest importers of high-tech weapons, medical systems, all kind of things. We are the largest importer, and yet we are the largest exporter of the brains. We exporting brains, or wo jo brains ke saath jo whatever they make, they come back and we buy it. This is very serious going on in many industries. AI in education. AI in education. The future of e-learning is highly automated, personalized, individualized training. So here I will tell you what has happened is China has started automating schools. So a teacher will know very in tremendous detail, more detail than humanly possible, about every student, where they're stuck, what is going on, what to do with them, their behavior, and being able to anticipate that when I ask these questions, this is the likelihood this person will answer properly, this person will not answer properly, again through the use of neural networks and machine learning. So China is also leading in the automation of education, and China has no fear of privacy. So the privacy of students is not an issue, and they are just watching them, trying to improve their performance. And parents don't seem to care. Parents in China are used to the fact that, okay, the government is looking at everybody all the time. Fine, that is okay. And the result is that my children will be better, smarter, because this AI system is going to help them out. So this AI in legal systems, I'll skip this a little bit. I don't know how much. I think in India also they're doing some work. I talked to some people. They said that Supreme Court is trying to use machine learning in India. Certainly, when they have thousands of pages of text, evidence and whatnot, AI systems can be used to make some sense out of it, to synthesize it, to to figure out what the arguments are, to build out counter arguments. This kind of thing is already happening. In tourism, people are now talking about virtual tourism, augmented reality goggles, so you can feel that you are flying in the sky. You can go down the Niagara Falls like you are, some kind of a champion swimmer or whatever. So this also requires suits, body suits, where you feel the tactile feelings. You actually feel it's cold, or it's wet. You are in the wet, or you're feeling the gravity pulling you down. So those kind of feelings, it's not just what you're seeing and what you're hearing, but also the tactile, the feeling of gravity, the feeling of rain, the feeling of cold snow coming at you. All of that you can now get good experience through these suits, these body suits and so on. So these wearables, this is called wearables, whether it is wearing a Fitbit, or whether it is wearing some medical device to keep track of your heart and monitor your stuff, or whether it is for entertainment purposes. Wearables, augmented reality, all kind of reality enhancement mechanisms are being used even for tourism. So this is going to be future of tourism. This is why there's a rumor that Apple might acquire Disney. Apple might acquire Disney. Why? Because Disney has all these virtual properties also. They have a movie industry, they have cartoons, they have characters, they understand the market of families and youth and what they like. So the future of taking all this video asset, this film asset, stories, and turning these into virtual reality, augmented reality, and putting out. So instead of going to a theme park, you enjoy the same thing without having to travel. Or if you go to a theme park, the experience will be more enhanced. You will get more excitement than you would ordinarily. So these are some of the applications. Now imagine if you talk to Mona Lisa and Mona Lisa talks back to you. Mona Lisa has different moods, has laugh, cry, anger, talk. And this is a screen on which this very exact Mona Lisa, but this is talking Mona Lisa. So now this Mona Lisa, using the exact Mona Lisa look, but now with different expressions. Mona Lisa, this virtual Mona Lisa can talk in not only French but in Tamil, and in Sanskrit, and in Japanese, and in whatever language you want in the world. So this is also very interesting. So this is creativity also. So in creativity, they have developed uh, systems that can write editorial. So for example, you want to write so many 1,000 word editorial or 3,000 word editorial on scan all the news stories about what is happening in US election, and write a very factual story, editorial. It look like a human being had written. The machines are doing it. Or take sports, yesterday's sports game. Who did what in the sports game, and what was good, not good, and all that stuff, and write an editorial. So editorial considered something very creative. Human beings are required to do it. Now they are producing machine AI editorials. When these editorials are shown to human beings who are expert editors, and they're asked which one is written by machine and which one is written by a human being? They can't tell. That is the test. The test is I'll give you 10 editorials written by machine, 10 editorials written by good, solid human writers. And these 20, you have to tell me which is which, and you can't tell me. That's what's happening in the creativity. There is creativity also in music composition. Music has been composed by AI systems, which the music experts cannot tell whether this piece is by a human being or it is by a machine. That is how good it is becoming. So don't underestimate the power of AI. Now, these are all tectonic shifts. I could go on, give you a one-day seminar, a one-week course on AI, but I'm not here to do that. I wanted to give you a little insight in order to go into what the challenges are. So there is a multi-trillion dollar economy which is being produced. Some of the richest people in the world are from this economy. Some of the largest companies in the world are in this economy. Unfortunately, India doesn't have such a company. India, in the top, out of the top several companies, they all tend to be mostly American and Chinese, a few European, but that is, and one Japanese, also. So one or two. But you don't find Indian companies at the cutting edge of all this. Indian companies are consuming, importing, and marketing it in India, but it is not original development, R&D development by the Indian companies. So what is the challenge? So this slide tells you the big challenge is if you have too much automation, it will create unemployment. Okay, that is true. If you have too little automation, then India will not be globally competitive. Our industries will be behind. Our products will not be that good. Our military will be behind. All the different sectors of the economy will be behind if we don't have enough AI. If we have too much AI, it may create unemployment. So this is a very tough job that Indian leaders have to do, and I'm not sure they're doing it. I'm not sure they're doing it. They're just waking up, and they're waking up as a reaction to China. They're not. India is 10 years behind China in AI. Let me just tell you, India is 10 years behind China in AI. Okay, and even now, even after the increase in AI funding in India, the annual amount of budget in India is tiny compared to the annual budget in USA, the annual budget in Japan and China. So India is not in the top 5, 6, 7 countries as far as budget is concerned. India is at the top in terms of number of AI specialists, brains hang. But those brains are not working for India. Most of the tremendous brains in AI gone overseas. They're working for foreign company. The ones that are in India are working for Microsoft India, Google India, like that. So if you look at the number of patents, I will give you some data. If you look at the number of patents being developed in AI in the world, India has a very, very tiny share. Not Indian people as individuals, yes, but that individual is working for a multinational foreign company. US Department of Defense hires a lot of people. Pentagon hires a lot of people. I know Indians in the US who's making a ton of money working for US Defense or military or some, classified something or other, doing very well. So I'm not bothered about Indians as individuals. That's like 0.01% of India's population who are able to do all that. But I'm talking about most Indian people, majority. 500 million people at the bottom. The 500 million people at the bottom, I'm concerned about them. Now, some people say, well, there have been many industrial revolutions in the past also. There was one guy talking from the British side in this RAISE conference, RAISE 2020, where I was a speaker. In the same panel, the guy who spoke first from Britain, he said when the industrial revolution came, a lot of jobs were gone. He gave some examples, and the industrial revolution automated these jobs, but new jobs were created, new factories were created. Overall, society was better off because we got industrialized, economy boomed. So I responded, the industrial revolution of Britain created a new economy and new jobs in Britain, but killed the jobs in India. It created colonization. So one country which was very industrialized, India had a manufacturing economy, but it was not electrified. It was not with electricity running it. It was not automated. Britain took those jobs in textiles and moved them to Manchester. Britain took the jobs. India had pioneered metallurgy. India was the leader in steel manufacturing. In many, many things, India was the leader. the industrial revolution did not have the same impact. It's not like India also benefited and they also benefited. India lost from being 25-30% of world GDP. India became less than 2%. And Britain, which was nobody, not at all around the scene, took all this traditional industry from India, automated it with the Industrial Revolution, and leapfrogged as the world's biggest power. Tiny island country became the world's biggest power. So the Industrial Revolution did not create an equal impact. It was not fair to the Indians. So the British guy never responded. I sent him my reply. He never responded. So, I'll tell you, this chart shows what are the reasons the impact in the past and impact now are different. First, in those days, capital was limited. So if somebody invented a factory, it was not an instant success. It could not be scaled very quickly because it would take 1-2 generations to spread the technology, because there was limited capital. And so even if you had something for farm to automate or for some manufacturing to automate, it would take a long time. More and more people would adopt. Today, the adoption rate is very quick. So the impact of AI is dramatic and sudden. Second is the R&D was very slow, and today R&D is fast. If somebody has a proof of concept that this thing will work, 100 others will jump in and start developing the same thing. Machines in those days replaced manual work, but there was a higher level of work called intellectual work, which we could do. But right now, if machines are replacing the intellectual work, what is even higher than that machines won't be able to do? Maybe a few things, but people say creativity, but I've showed you examples. Even creativity is vulnerable. Even creativity is vulnerable. If my machines can make music and make paintings and write editorials such that you can't even tell it's a machine doing it, how can you say that human jobs will be safe? How can you say that? If a machine does it for a fraction of the cost and the customer cannot tell the difference, then how does it matter? So this is a very pragmatic thing. Population is a very big problem against India. The previous person who introduced me said we have youth dividend because we have young population. In my book, I question whether the youth is a dividend or a liability, whether such a huge population is an asset or a liability. Youth are an asset if you give them jobs. But if you don't have jobs, then it's a very, youth have arms and legs, have a stomach to feed. Youth also need consumer goods. They need house. They need facilities. And so a huge burden to look after a population where some people are productive, but a lot of people are not productive. So how do you balance that? That is an issue. Now, unemployment is where there are a lot of companies that have made forecasts on the future of jobs and AI impact and all that. I disagree with them. I disagree with many of the forecasts because I give reasons in my book why the forecasts are not correct. They are saying that only routine jobs will get automated. Not true. They argue the argument that AI will augment the job. It will make your job better and more productive, but not replace you. Not true. Initially, AI will augment the worker, make him more productive, but eventually the number of workers needed will go down. Initially, it will just improve quality initially, but eventually it will create a new standard and many human beings will not be able to live up to that standard. Not everybody can be educated into AI. Please understand. I'm not talking about young, smart people like you in the audience. I'm talking about the youth of India, the hundreds of millions who are not even educated at the basic level today. Forget AI. They're not educated at the basic level today. So I question. My work is done on. I've got hundreds of reports from everywhere. I've read a few thousand pages of research reports on what everybody's saying about forecasting and the future of jobs here and there. And here, the International Labor Organization also. I won't go into all the quotes because we have limited time. They are also saying that many more jobs will be lost, especially in the poor countries. Then here is a quote from Bain and Company, which is a consulting company for big corporate people. They're saying income equality, having grown steadily throughout the 2020s, could approach or exceed historic peaks. So what they're saying is in the 2020s, it will be growing. And by the time 2030 comes, the inequality will be at a huge inequality of jobs. Education system standards will play an important role. Countries like Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, China, where the existing standards are already high, can jump ahead to AI and train, lots of people. But in a place like India, where we don't even have basic education of a high standard, many people are uneducated. Those who are educated officially are not properly educated. They just got a thappa, but they're not properly educated. These people cannot just jump ahead to AI. Okay, and then infrastructure, infrastructure of education. You can't just suddenly. This new NEP has got problems. I have a lot of problems with the NEP. I don't want to get into that here. But even if you have a policy, by the time you create infrastructure, you train lakhs of teachers, you do all of that, it's going to take a very long time. So you have to start with the new generation. What happened to the current generation? What happens? You people are young people. आप जैसे लोग जो आपकी एज के लोग जो गांव में रहते हैं, रूरल पीपल, एवरेज आम आदमी, they're not so well educated. You cannot educate them right now because you can start with a new education policy for young people. What about the older people who cannot? What will happen to them? You have to think like that also. So, um, so then the AI impact on society will be very different. I already mentioned from place to place. In some places they will get a boom. In some places it will go bust. So the people in India with the elitist education, top 0.1% of the population who go to these elite IIT, IIM, a few other good places like that, they can go anywhere in the world and make a lot of money. I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about the Rashtra. The Rashtra has to be looked after. Its body is 1.3 billion people. Forget the top 50 million. I'm talking about the bottom 500 million. Okay, so that is the place where the impact will be serious. So the geographical concentration I already talked to you about. A place like Bangalore may do well, but a place like Bihar with lot more people may do very poorly. UP may do very poorly because you do not have the same potential for the average person in those places to catch up with the AI and be world class. You either have to be world class or you're out. So another thing that I found is that all these reports in India are using Western frameworks and applying Indian numbers. They are making assumptions based on the West. They should know better. They are making assumptions that what will happen to the small and medium enterprises if we do this policy. And they're saying, well, something similar happened in Germany, Brazil, South Africa. And therefore, there's a book by the chairman of Tata and a co-author on it's called Bridgidal, 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 which says let's bridge the old economy and the new economy with AI. And it's a very brilliant book, very nice book. I quoted it quite a lot, but it makes assumptions about the prediction on what will happen in India with certain policies. And when you look at the end note where he's explaining how he made the assumption that certain other countries have this experience. And his countries are Germany, Brazil, South Africa, and one or two others. And he's saying that they had this experience. I don't buy that methodology. Somebody needs to go do bottom-up research in India from the grassroots, the village level up, get original data, behavior data, find out. So, so the impact on the bottom 500 of Indians in economic status has not been properly addressed by the people who are writing these reports on AI. They'll either say, हाँ उनको फायदा हो जाएगा, food production बढ़ जाएगी, बड़ी उनकी job को क्या होगा? And the reports by FICCI, by CII, by Arthur Andersen, by PricewaterhouseCoopers India, by Ernst and Young India, by all these McKinsey India, I have read all of those reports. Niti Aayog, I've read the Niti Aayog report. In fact, I will tell you, Niti Aayog is supporting some of the things that I've said. So experts, then experts are saying that okay, there will be disruption, but retraining, we will retrain all the people. कौन करेगा retrain? आपने budget निकाला है? How to retrain lakhs of people? Who will pay the cost? How many weeks or months of training per person? And who is going to pay the cost? So they've said, okay, there will be some philanthropists जो दान दे देंगे. कौन देगा? आप देंगे? Who going to give? I mean, you have to give me specifics. Problem is specific. I can quantify the problem. If you say कि solution is उसको retraining करेंगे, आपको quantify करना पड़ेगा. And then you have to tell me where will the budget come from, because it's not a small amount of money. Also, can a person is in his middle years be retrained? A person is 40s, 45, and he's not a tech person, can you really retrain him? Is it really possible? I don't think so. So, this business is like jugaad. They are trying to tell you, हाँ हाँ सब कुछ ठीक है, because they don't want people to hold them responsible कि आपको problem solve करना है. You are running the country, you are the industrialists, you are the gurus, you are the media leaders, you are the thought leaders, you are the government leaders. आपको ये problem solve करना है. They have not wanted to accept this problem. So this burden of कि हम re-educate करेंगे या जो बहुत अमीर लोग हैं उनको दान दे देंगे, this is just a good way to get rid of the problem. But you, the young people, have to take this on very seriously and demand solutions. So there is this future of jobs report which says nearly a quarter of companies are undecided or unlikely to pursue retraining of pre-existing employees, and 2/3 expect the workers to adapt and pick up skills on their own. Only 1/3 stated that they would prioritize at-risk employees. Only one out of three companies have said that we are going to define who's at risk, and we're going to look after these people. We're going to reskill them and upskill them. Otherwise, they talk about the word reskilling, upskilling in seminars. Seminars में बात करते हैं, but if you ask them इसका बजट क्या है, कहाँ पर आएगा, कहाँ से बजट आएगा, आपके एनुअल रिपोर्ट में इतना बजट अलाउंस लगा है, they will say, as far as actually planning the budget to retrain and upskill people, they have not done it. So India wants to be world-class manufacturing base, which is very good. But India's education system is uncompetitive to produce the workers needed. And so also, we have a lot of low wage and low skilled people. So we can do low tech manufacturing. As far as research is concerned, engineering is concerned, we have brains, but they are not working for India to get intellectual property owned by India. They're working for intellectual property that goes to somebody else. Niti Aayog said that, I'll quote this, India's got the largest second largest STEM production of graduates, but they're doing very low tech work. They're not doing pioneering, cutting edge work. Very few small scale projects in IIT here, there. I know those people, and they're doing very good work, but it's very small scale and very few. And the Niti Aayog the report names TCS, Wipro, and Infosys, and says that their contribution to research has been very limited compared to their size. It says that. And it says that even though these companies are working with the biggest American and European companies in all the different industries, we talked about, banking, legal, manufacturing, we talked about healthcare, they are working with those companies. And they have known for the past 10 years what the trends are, but they have not invested in those technologies themselves. They're just doing kuli work. Aapko hum seva karenge, aap humko paisa de dijiye. That is the job that these companies have been doing and letting the nation down. So I want to talk about labor arbitrage. Labor arbitrage means कि आप किसी को $1,000 में hire करो और उसको $3,000 में client को बेच दो. So poor people who are educated from small towns, villages, who learn a little bit about IT, and middle class people, even well educated, even well-to-do people, they are being marketed like construction workers from Bihar, Odisha being marketed in Delhi. Okay, so what is happening is somebody goes to some poor village, he brings 1,000, 2,000 people, unko thodi jaldi se training karke, then he put them on a construction site in India and he makes 3 times the salary. So this is the same model being used by the tech people exporting labor. Now, initially it works. Initially it works for a while because labor makes more money, because in the village they're not getting much help. Then the middleman make billionaire, he become billionaire, and it seems to work. But it is not sustainable. You cannot continue this model. In the end, you have a large population dependent on selling cheap labor, and it cannot be sustained. And India has faced that problem now. The laborer from Bihar does not own equity in the construction that he built. So he built some mansion for a rich man, but even one brick is not his. He does not own a single brick, though he may have installed lakhs of bricks. So the bricks belong to the client. The same way, the programmers are bricklayers. The programmer who's developing millions of lines of code for Microsoft, those lines of codes are like bricks, but they belong to Microsoft. They don't belong to him. So this is the problem of labor arbitrage. A few middlemen make billionaires, and we do neta, अरे वाह आप तो बहुत ही great है, आप तो कितना बड़ा घर में रहते हैं, आपके पास private jet है. Why is the nation praising such people who filled in their own pockets by actually selling the brains of India to foreign clients and not reinvested that profit to build our own technology. This is my point. So I feel that uh, there are many reasons. You can go, I will send you my slides later, you can go through this. I want to get to the Q&A and take some questions. So also there's a problem that some of the people leave, but then they're visa dependent. Will they get visa, will they not get visa, will the US government allow this, that? So हम उनके भीख मांग रहे हैं कि हमको इतनी जॉब चाहिए और हमारा वीजा प्लीज दे दीजिए. अमेरिकन एम्बेसी और इन एम्बेसीज के सामने इतनी बड़ी माइल लॉन्ग लाइन लगी रहती है वीजा लेने के लिए. दिस इज अ डिसग्रेस. हाउ कैन यू से हम विश्व गुरु बन गए हैं जब हम भीख मांग रहे हैं? हाउ कैन यू से हम टेक जाइंट्स है, बट वो टेक लोग हैं, वो वी आर डूइंग चीप लेबर फॉर अदर पीपल. How is that a good strategy? I think not. So uh, the reality is that India's newly minted billionaires were short-sighted, the products of jugaad and selfishness. They achieved instant wealth but failed to anticipate global trends. And many received Padma Awards because they built personal fortunes, even though they made precious little contribution towards nation building. This is, I'm open and I'm willing to talk to the billionaires of India and do a study of whether they've really helped the nation the way Chinese entrepreneurs helped their country. Not only first they sold them cheap labor, but they reinvested the money not to make big houses and yachts and live a good lifestyle. They reinvested that money in creating future technology. They started investing in what will be big technology 10 years from now, and let's build it in China. That is what they did. We did not do that. Chinese billionaires, unlike their Indian counterparts, invested back to build indigenous tech giants to expand their technological footprint. For example, they have Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu. They have 10, 20 gigantic companies that China has created. So the bottom line is the question of where India stands in relation to this duopoly meaning America, China are the two. Where is India in all this? हम labor supply करते जा रहे हैं. So another thing I want to tell you is GDP is not the same thing as employment. Every 10% growth in GDP increases the employment by 1%. Please note this. This is a Azim Premji University research report. When from one time to another time, when GDP has grown by 10%, the employment created by that growth is only 1%. Okay, so what is happening is GDP is growing. People with capital are making the money, not people with labor. There are capital input, labor input in any economic model. Labor should also participate in the growth. People with capital are making money, but people who are supplying labor are growing very slow. So challenges are facing India are poorly trained graduates, talent drained to global companies, Indian companies primarily operating on labor arbitrage, inadequate research infrastructure for AI, poor research output by Indian organizations, little fundamental innovation being done in India. So these are very serious problems. And there are haves and have-nots. The haves among you, there'll be many haves, but we as human beings should look after the have-not. जिनके पास नहीं होगा. Worker obsolescence is more dramatic than earlier disruptions in the previous industrial revolution. Biggest impact will be on low socioeconomic strata, poor people. Labor's share of GDP is declining. Capital share of GDP is increasing. And there'll be a bigger and bigger concentration of wealth. I've got some data in this book on how wealth is being more and more concentrated with fewer and fewer people. So India's non-AI workers will be left behind. एक तो AI workers हैं, but what about non-AI workers जो AI में नहीं आ सके? So the impact on this will be very high. The impact on such people will be very high. So I will move forward very quickly so I can take questions. So we want to be Vishwa Guru. We want to be Vishwa Guru, and I have a 4-step strategy on how to be Vishwa Guru. But I will not talk about all these because I want to jump ahead. I want to close by saying that that will take too much time because that's a lot of material in the book. I want to keep in touch with you guys who are interested in this topic because it concerns your future. If you want to write to me, Rajiv Malhotra, ये लिख लीजिए 2007@gmail.com, or contact the following. It's even better. You go to this rajivmalhotra.com/AI book. rajivmalhotra.com/AI book. उसमें आप अपना name, email ID, detail भेज दीजिए. We will keep in touch with you. We will communicate with you. We will tell you what is going on, what is the plan. Book कब निकली है, आपको advance में जो कुछ देना, आपको advance में we will inform you. And when the book comes out, there will be an online e-learning courses courses. I have lots of webinars, lots of PowerPoints giving details of all this stuff that I'm talking in the book. And I want to create a small army of intellectual Kshatriyas who are going to mobilize this issue and put it as part of the central debate. When 30, 40 years ago, global warming was being talked about, global warming. When global warming was being talked about, people knew very little about it. People knew very little about it. And uh, today, this issue of AI, impact on society, is where global warming was 30 years ago. Impact of global warming on society. The technical people knew, scientists knew, experts knew, but the Aam Aadmi was not involved. So I'm writing a book for the common person who is a well-educated person, and I'm trying to shake them up, wake them up, so that they can join me, and we have to go to those who make policy in industry, the gurus of society, media people, government people, and we have to bring in a new point of view, which is what my book offers. So with this, I'll say thank you very much.